Welcome to Moments with Marianne. This is your host, Marianne Pastana. And we're here today with special guest, Asha Castleberry, who's here to share with us her new book, Why National Security Matters, a memoir. So how much do you really know about what shapes our national security? Is it just about military strategy, or is it something that affects all of us every day? Well, today's guest is here to share with us just that. Asha Castleberry is a national security and foreign policy expert, U.S. Army veteran, author, and former U.S. congressional candidate. With over a decade of experience in Middle East policy, she served as a senior official in the Bureau of Near Eastern Affairs under the Biden-Harris administration and held key roles in Kuwait, Iraq, and Jordan. A highly sought-after speaker, Asha has participated in high-level forums, including the Ebrel Security Forum and the Foreign Policy Institute Black Sea Conference. Asha served as a Cyrus Vance visiting professor at Mount Holyoke College. She also taught at Fordham, George Washington, and Baruch College. A military officer in the Army Reserves, Asha is a counsel on foreign relations, founder of the Diversity in National Security Network, and recipient of numerous honors, including the Middle East Policy Council's 40 Under 40. A graduate of Hampton University and Columbia University, with studies at Oxford and in China, Asha is frequently featured in many national and international outlets like CNN, MSNBC, CBS News, Fox News, BBC News, Voice of America, The Washington Post, and many more. So welcome to the show, Asha Castleberry.
Thank you so much, Marianne, for the wonderful opportunity.
My goodness, what an honor it is to have you here and to talk about this. And I have to tell you, you have such a remarkable background. I am just so delighted that we get to spend this time together. What inspired you to write this book?
Well, this is a great question. First and foremost, what made me want to write this book is the fact of the matter that when I was deployed in the Middle East, I learned a lot about geopolitical issues, policy implementation conducted by the United States along with their allies and partners. So I felt like I wanted to provide more insight to the American people about what is it like to be a public servant helping to protect our country in the Middle East. So I felt that, the insight would be helpful to or invaluable when it comes to understanding the world, because when you look at the United States, many of us tend to have an isolated mindset as far as understanding the role of our country in the international arena. So I wanted to offer some insight involving geopolitical issues, and also when it comes to security cooperation and counterterrorism. But I didn't stop right there. The book was initially about Middle East policy. And then I said, you know what? I want to provide more insight on multiple topics. So I decided to discuss more of my experiences, my frontline experiences in places like China, which taught me a lot about the role of China in the global economy in the 21st century. Also, my work in Central America, where I was able to understand more about democracy, especially engage in a election observing mission in El Salvador. And then I also talked about other critical issues like my work at the United Nations, learn about collective diplomacy in the Security Council, and then also discussed my experiences running for Congress during COVID-19, and just being able to experience a pandemic, a health threat that came from outside the United States and just saw no borders and impacted millions of us in the United States, and which is a game changer going into into this world of confusion. As wow, we're really dealing with a health security issue, and it's actually impacting our democracy. So I think all these frontliner experiences are invaluable for people to learn, and not only to learn, but to adapt to what is like in the 21st century as far as dealing with these national security, foreign affairs issues. So my book talks a lot about different key takeaways, recommendations on how to adapt to becoming more competitive in the education system. Like we should invest more in STEM, science, technology, engineering, arts, mathematics. Also, we should have more of our students, American students, pursuing global awareness programs or studying abroad. Also, how do we deal with emerging industries like artificial intelligence? How do we deal with political instability in Washington? Also, last but not least, how do we deal with combat and climate change? So many different areas of national security interests that I wanted to not only discuss, but what are ways on how to deal with them.
It seems that the American people are very hungry for this type of topic and more information on learning exactly what national security is. Because a lot of times, I mean, if someone they finish high school, they finish college, and they're off working, that's not really something that's on the forefront of their mind unless they're working in that industry.
Right, exactly. Or it's treated as more like reactionary. When you look at the counterterrorism era, most Americans did not really indulge in the counterterrorism discussion unless they were hit at home, in domestically, right? So, for instance, a perfect example, many of us weren't really tracking the United States role in engaging or going against ISIS until a situation like San Bernardino happened, where it impacted a local community in California. So, national security foreign policy, the impacts are usually you don't usually see the average American talking about it unless it's more on a reactionary situation where it directly impacted them at home.
Well, I know so many people are so grateful for this book because it's helping to change that narrative and going from reactionary to be very, proactive in how we address this.
Yes, absolutely. And like when you look at some of the additional content in the book, I discuss a lot about how do we prepare for a future economic recession. So I discuss about the tariffs issues between the United States and China, how doubling down on tariffs is actually counterproductive and threatening to our economic security. And learning about that, a- as far as learning about the Chinese economy in 2005 when I was there in Shanghai, and then also learning about that during the administration before the Biden administration. So, understanding the economy is really important when it comes to geopolitical issues is critical, and I'm so happy that I was able to provide insight. And uh, how do we just adjust or adapt to those type of issues? Like one point I mentioned is we should be practicing more group economics, working as a family on how to counter collectively economic threats. Right, we should be boosting financial literacy or economic literacy in the country, where you've seen South Carolina just passed a law not too long ago about how we need more programs that help build awareness about economic literacy. So, just different ways on how we can better adapt to the 21st century global economy and better safeguard ourselves from economic threats.
After 9/11, you experienced national security from a very unique vantage point. How did that moment really shape your personal and professional path in this field?
I would say after witnessing 9/11 in my backyard in New York, that was definitely a game changer for me. I learned that, again, a foreign threat can come into the United States, your country, and attack people within your country and even people you might know from your community. So, my uncle during that time was actually um, at his job during the 9/11 attacks and almost passed away from that attack, and his girlfriend. So I talked about how that impacted us as a family, worrying about my uncle. And then from there on, my patriotism just went sky high. And along with many other Americans, where we just wanted to join the armed forces. So I'm part of that generation right after 9/11. I wanted to join the armed forces, not just to learn about leadership, being able to have a job, but also to play a role in protecting our country. So right after 9/11, At that during that time, I was in the 11th grade. I joined ROTC, and I was commissioned as a second lieutenant in 2006 in the U.S. Army Reserves.
Well, thank you for your service. I mean, that's so huge, especially during that time. And I can remember how the nation came together during that time.
Yes, a moment that we need to have again.
It would be nice to feel that again. So, it-
Yes.
I know earlier you mentioned China. So, how do you see the U.S. responding to the challenges posed by China today?
When you look at China, as far as their role in the international community, especially their relationship with the United States, you could characterize it in four different buckets. You're going to see where China is going to cooperate with the United States, compete against the United States, also play a neutral role when it comes to certain issues, as well as you're going to see where China will be involved or engage in some sort of threatening approaches. So I would say you could characterize it in four different buckets. And that's important to note because the United States is going to shape their policies based on those four buckets. So with whether it's the Democrat or Republican administration, I think that you're going to see both, regardless of political affiliation, engage in those four buckets. And and I feel that that's what we call smart diplomacy because just engaging in China with China on, let's say, on a threatening adversarial approach is counterproductive or not smart diplomacy because we also have to cooperate with China, like on issues involving climate change or what we talked about with COVID-19, or we talked about some issues involving the economy. So that's where it gets dicey in terms of we can't necessarily completely push be isolated from China. Our economies are so interconnected that we have to deal with them. So that's why when it comes to the tariffs issue, it's really, really, really risky when you double down too much as far as imposing tariffs on China because it in a way indirectly impacts us when it comes to government revenue, the trade deficit, our economy overall eventually starts to hurt from those ongoing, enduring tariffs. So it's important to again engage with China both on a cooperative basis or a competitive basis.
Well, thank you. I appreciate you taking the time to answer that. And yeah, I mean, your background's just so fascinating. I'd love to touch on your time in El Salvador. I mean, how did your experience must have really informed some kind of understanding for you about how, especially like struggling areas, struggling regions are dealing with their governance.
Yes. So after my experience as a election observer in San Salvador, El Salvador, this was during the presidential elections, and also this was right after President Obama's presidential elections. It was quite fascinating to watch or observe the presidential elections in El Salvador. And when you think of their democracy, you can characterize it as a fragile democracy where it's not as strong as ours. There are some weaknesses, some grievances, some issues involving how they can conduct their presidential elections. So to learn about their disadvantages taught me a lot about just how it's like to vote in a fragile democracy. And then also, it encouraged me more to appreciate my own democracy as far as how strong it is. And so, returning back home from El Salvador, I my interest in terms of never to take your democracy for granted just peaked. And also, too, I said to myself, our democracy is not perfect, but the one thing that we should always do as a society is find out ways on how to strengthen it than moving backwards. So so always, acknowledge the fact that we have work to do, but don't be in the business of moving backwards when it comes to our democracy. So just based on, my experiences in El Salvador, that is what definitely just was a game changer in terms of my perspective on democracy in Central America.
I can see where that would really be that because it's so stark in the differences as they're trying to navigate the whole democracy landscape.
Yes, especially during a post-Cold War era, and you're dealing with leadership that tends to be semi-authoritative, still struggling with, you know, looking out for building up strong institutions, not really uh, still in pursuit of mispractices when it comes to providing services to the people within their country. So there is definitely a fragility or a struggle when it comes to leadership in many of these countries. And and we're not here to judge as Americans. One thing we can do is we have to understand that we're our democracy is not like theirs where it in other countries democracies take time to transition to a strong one. There's some road bumps, there's some sometimes you have to move backwards in order to move forward. We're kind of experiencing that right now. so so understanding the democracy in El Salvador and just in Central America, um, I it was important to me to not judge how the struggles, the challenges that they were facing in terms of how to deal with their grievances and significant challenges there. And I definitely learned this point from Secretary of State Condoleezza Rice, where she said we shall not judge transitional democracies because it may take way more years or decades for them to transition to a stronger democracy. So that's definitely an important point to note.
Oh my goodness. Yeah, I agree with you on that. I have such great respect for them doing, approaching democracy and making that fight. It's definitely something that takes some time. It's not an overnight snap your fingers and here we are. What a journey. And one of the things I found so fascinating about your background is your work with the United Nations. What were some of the most challenging aspects of diplomacy in national security that you saw there?
The one thing that I really, really appreciate my time at the United Nations is for well, looking at the educational awareness about global issues was absolutely incredible. Learning about the different issues, falling under the umbrella of during that time the Millennium Development Goals, now what we know as Sustainment Development Goals, and how when it comes to different issues, whether it's access to quality water, access to education, women empowerment, or women's rights. I mean, those type of issues are universal. It's not just in one region and or one area. These existing challenges are everywhere around the world. And what you see at the United Nations is that there's a collectivism of different countries coming together to combat those issues. So at the Security Council, representing the United States, there working with the State Department, we had a fascinating experience representing U.S. interests at the Security Council. And what was really fascinating is that with other countries that were part of the Security Council, like China, United Kingdom, France, the P5+1, and then other members of the Security Council, non-permanent members, we agreed on a lot. It was really interesting whether it was like, okay, we're going to deploy a peacekeeping mission in this country. Many of us had to, make sure that we passed a resolution in order to, authorize that peacekeeping mission. But the one thing that was really, really interesting but tiring at times is that we had to hear from all the countries that had a perspective on a specific issue. So multilateralism diplomacy is long, it's tiring, it's overwhelming because so many countries have long speeches as far as what they want to share their perspective on a specific issue. So it was really interesting to sit there at the Security Council behind our U.S. ambassador to the United Nations during that time, Susan Rice, to listen to the different perspectives from all the countries on a specific issue.
As a veteran, diplomat, and policy expert, you've seen national security evolve. What are some of the most critical changes you anticipate in the field over the next decade?
Some of the critical challenges that I think our United States will face in the national security domain is, as far as overall objectives, is to adapt to the era of strategic competition, where we'll be competing against Russia and China for the next 10 years. I think there's going to be some success stories, and I also think there's going to be some challenges. And when we look at these success stories or challenges, we have to look across a wide range of security issues, from hard to soft security issues. It's not just the hard ones where we're just focusing on competing against China, Russia, and military in the military domain or intelligence. We also are in the business of doing so when it comes to technology, to economics, to education, even culture. When it comes to like music, influencers, the competition is covered across the range, the wide range of the spectrum when it comes to national security issues. As far as success and hardships, it's all going to be based on the decision maker when it comes to who sits in the White House. That's one. Also, as far as the United States goes, how resilient are we from coming out of COVID-19? How can we make sure that we're building up a competitive education system so we can increase the number of Americans to go into the STEM field? How do we better adapt, especially when it comes to innovation involving technology? So many different steps or recommendations or policy recommendations that we need to think about as far as how can we stay competitive against our near peer competitors. And between our when we look at our near peer competitors, the enduring competitor known as China is definitely the one that we're engaging in for the next 10 years. So and China is more in the position of being more competitive in an enduring approach, looking across the entire spectrum, especially when it comes to economics and technology.
What would you like readers and our listeners to take away from your book?
Yes, thank you. Well, one is that in my book, I underscore the importance of strategic predictability, which is I not only am calling for more Americans to understand our the state of our national security in the 21st century, or where the United States, how we're positioned in the 21st century. But I also want you to think about the predictability of it. What does this look like in the future? And I urge Americans to have these kind of, these discussions at home with your families. And what can we do to better adapt to our the state of our national security looking into the future? Like, for instance, when you think about the economics, how do we adapt to the global economy? Looking at emerging issues like cryptocurrency. Cryptocurrency for many years was looked at, oh, we had to stay away, or like Warren Buffett said, it's like rat poison. But now it's being more normalized to where it's something that we may have to deal with, right, more in the future. Also, I would like for the American people to as far as think about what other emerging issues like artificial intelligence, how do we adapt to those, that emerging domain? How does that impact us in the future? It reminds me of of coming up watching movies like The Terminator or Total Recall, right? Or Back to the Future. How do we adapt to the role of technology? Another takeaway I would say when it comes to my book is uh understanding the or appreciating the role of the United States around the world. That our position is not always bad. It's good. I feel that the world is a lot safer when the United States is in leadership. It's just that the United States at times tends to have its own internal challenges. So I think that is important to note. So with that being said, I'm calling for more Americans in my book to make sure that they learn about their government, the role of their government, understand the three branches of government when it comes to foreign affairs and national security. We have spent too much time outside of government, and just sometimes those that are not too fond of government throwing rocks at it. Instead, I would like for us to learn more about government and, in fact, learn how to become a public servant, whether you want to be a foreign service officer or serve in the military. That's one of the key takeaways too that I would like for people to learn, and that was also what changed my life too. Serving as a public servant, both in the defense side of the house as a military officer, and also at the State Department. And last but not least, one of the key takeaways I would say when it comes to my book, as far as learning, is definitely understanding the role of veterans in the military families community. I feel that there's importance when it comes to protecting our veterans, appreciate them, making sure that we're more integrated into society. I think veterans can offer more. I know for some people they may feel that there's no way that veterans are not as integrated in society, but yes, that's still a hardship or a challenge for many of us. So that is one key takeaway I could say too that's important that I would like to underscore, and have underscored a lot of it in throughout my book.
Well, I think we owe so much to our veterans, including you, and people who have so bravely stood up for our country. We need to do more for our veterans. So thank you. Where can our listeners connect with you and be part of your community and learn more about your book?
Yes, please visit my website, www.ashacastleberry.com, and you can purchase my book there. And also, you can purchase my book at Barnes and Noble and also Amazon.
Well, Asha, thank you so much for taking the time to be on the show with us here today.
Thank you.
Well, thank you, Asha. It has been such an honor to have you here and to talk about your new memoir, Why National Security Matters. Make sure to visit Asha's website at ashacastleberry.com, be part of her community, and learn more about her work. Her book, Why National Security Matters, is available at Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and all indie retailers. And if you don't see it on the shelf, ask for them to order it. Well, we're at the end of our time today. I'd like to thank everyone for tuning in. You've been listening to Moments with Marianne, where we make every moment count.
In a single moment, your life can change. Moments with Marianne is a transformative hour that covers an endless array of topics with the best of the best. Her guests are leaders in their fields, ranging from inspirational authors, top industry leaders, and business and spiritual entrepreneurs. Each guest is gifted and a true visionary, a recognized leader in her own work, and while teaching others to develop, refocus, and grow, Marianne will bring the best guest and sometimes a special surprise. Don't miss this. You never know just which moment will change your life forever. Make sure to tune in and visit momentswithmarianne.com for more information.